What's up, YouTube? David Medawar here. If you're wondering what the heck you're doing in life, or you feel like you're stuck in a rut, you don't know what your mission or purpose or goal is, I'm glad you're here, because one thing I do want to talk about is how our mission in life may evolve and how there can be certain drivers of what we do that can actually hold us back for our greater calling. Are you excited with what you do? Because I can tell you right now that if you're doing something that you're not only good at, but you are passionate about, you're going to be able to produce so much more and contribute so much more to society. And whether it's something like a firefighter, or you're a YouTube creator, or you're an artist, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what resume item it is. It doesn't matter what your pay is. Ultimately, what happens, right, is that we're all given God-given talents that are more natural to us. So say, for instance, somebody like myself, I would not want to be an English teacher because English class honestly was not my favorite. I was more of the math and science guy. You know, it's funny, I remember in school I would read these novels and there'd be a quiz about the plot and what's going to happen. And I couldn't always tell you exactly what would be next, but I had no problem remembering that there were specific dates and times on certain pages and the structures of the paragraphs looked a particular way. I'm more pattern driven and kind of an oddball, so that's just an example, right, where somebody like me, my greater calling has been engineering, and I'm a software engineer. Somebody like you might be an architect, you might be a chef. It really doesn't matter, but what really matters more is not only are we finding our calling, but are we actually passionate about it? So here are some of the things to watch out for in terms of what it is we're doing, and if we feel stuck and we want to make a change, what in particular we need to look at, right? So number one, if your primary driver of your passion is money, that is not sustainable. Because just because something pays well, even if you're good at it, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to enjoy it long term. Because ultimately what happens is that if we rely on something like money, then you get to a point where you might be in a rut in this particular career path, and now you're focused more on making excuses like, oh, well, it pays the bills well, or if I go to this other job, it's going to make more money for me, blah, blah, blah. And it's not to say that money is particularly good or bad. I think of it as more of a neutral medium. It's more of what we're doing with it, and also looking at what's really driving your passion. So money itself can be very tricky because on one hand, it can really help to put food on the table, to enable you to travel. Let's say you want to travel for your business, whatever. Ultimately, though, what we got to look at long term is if that becomes the primary driving factor, that can lead to burnout, it can lead to boredom, it can lead to just feeling like you need to stay in a career path or a job or a mission because it just pays well. What you can do, though, is that you can do something where if you feel like there's a greater calling to do something different in your life, what you're currently set up to be good at and what's paying the bills, that can be providing you a firm foundation where instead of selling all your belongings, quitting your job, and diving head deep into this unknown, which may not necessarily be bad, that might be what works for you, and that's great. That's where you can actually pivot and use the current foundation you have, the current financial stability, and move into what your greater calling is, right? The second thing to watch out for is going to be, are you doing what it is you're doing because you feel that you should or you've been told, right? We all have different familial upbringings. We have different peer groups. We may have been told at some point, oh, you'd be a great teacher, or you'd be a great data analyst, or you've got a great physique, you'd be a great model. And these aren't necessarily bad things. Really what matters more is this what you want to do? And it's great to take advice of others and get advice from various different outlets, and just form your own opinion. Really, though, are you doing it to be accepted? Are you doing it to be liked by your peer group, your family? And that's something to really dive deep within, because that can be a pitfall for us. We're now pigeonholing ourselves to doing something that we should do in our minds, but you're the one going to work, you're the one putting in the work. So look at really what makes you happy. And another thing to really watch out for is just because your calling has been the same way for a certain amount of time, it does not mean that your calling can never change. And if you're somebody of Christian faith like myself, that could be something where you get this calling from God. And I understand that not everybody in the audience may necessarily relate to that, and that's okay, whatever your calling might be. Really, what you gotta look at is, it's kind of like playing poker, where you're like, you know what, I got pocket aces, bro, I'm going all in. And on the flop, you just throw all your chips on the table, right? You might leave a little pile here, and all of a sudden the turn and river come, and you realize, well, statistically, I have no chance of winning anymore. But since I've already put so much money in the table, you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna go ahead and stay what's called pot committed. So in poker, pot committed means you know that it's a sunk cost and it's a losing situation, but you feel like since you've already invested so much time and money, that you need to stick with it. And that can be very detrimental when it comes to your greater calling. Just because you have been sticking it through thick and thin for so long, and you've done so many awesome things in that career path or whatever it is you've been doing, you may need to pivot, you may need to shift, and that's okay. One thing that can be a challenge is we may have this false belief that, oh, well, if I change my career, that maybe I'll be perceived as a failure, because everybody's got a 9-to-5. We're meant to have the same job after college up until retirement, and that's not necessarily true. And ultimately, too, this isn't black and white. You don't have to be in a situation where you have a day job and you can't do something that's part of your greater calling at the same time. For example, in my case, I absolutely love being a software engineer. It's still my primary day job. And this YouTube content creation has become more of a passion, side hobby of mine, because it's not about the paycheck. I already have a paycheck, but I found a greater calling just for my faith and through my struggles with anxiety, with pain in the past, with, relationship difficulty, whatever it is, to give back. And that's my bigger calling. That's something I've become passionate about. And I felt that whenever I would talk to my friends or peer groups and we're bouncing off ideas about things we've learned in life, maybe they're going through a hard time, or I would be out dancing and random strangers would just come up to me and share their life story. That is a signal that something is speaking loud and clear to you to get on with it and figure the hell out what it is you're gonna do with your life, because it may go beyond your day job. And so for me, that became my interest area, where I'm doing something I absolutely love doing now. And it doesn't mean that I still can't have a job. I still can't do my 9-to-5, because I absolutely love that too. Software engineering I've been doing for almost 20 years, and writing code's a hell of a lot of fun. And it's cool that I can supplement it with something like giving back on this YouTube channel, writing this book. I wrote this book on anxiety. If you want to check it out, you can look in the description below. And to be able to create some sort of content that can be put out there for the community, because mental health is something that we all know gets more and more talked about now, but at the same time is still heavily neglected. And so there are a lot of people hurting out there in the world trying to figure out what they want to do with their life, and it's something that we need to discuss. And my hope here is that a channel like this can get those discussions rolling. If you're feeling stuck, if you're trying to figure out what it is you want to do in life, I hope you click that subscribe button and stick around, because I've got a lot more content to come out in the future. And that's all. You guys take care. Later.